Hello everybody, welcome back to the Season of Us podcast. This is episode 17, and I know last video I said that I was going to have a special guest this time around, but they're still kind of debating if they are wanting to be in that vulnerable state of mind and be a part of this podcast. So hopefully next week I will be interviewing somebody, but today it's just going to be me. But you guys already know the whole routine, the whole way to get started. So grab your coffee, your tea, your water, your wine, or literally anything that you want to drink, and let's get started. So if you guys have been consistent with my videos, you guys know that a couple weeks back, probably a few weeks back, I interviewed my mom about, getting married young and the situation with my dad and getting a divorce and all of that good stuff. And I felt like it was finally time for me to share my perspective on my family, my parents, their relationship, just living in the same house as them, and what I experienced and how it affected me. So kind of a little background. I used to take so much pride in the fact that I had the perfect family. And I put that in quotations because we obviously were far from perfect, but in my eyes, I thought, well, my parents are still together, me and my siblings all get along, we have this huge house, the perfect backyard, we go to church, like every single thing about us was perfect because everybody thought, if your family is still one, like you're living the best life. And at that time I had so many friends that they would, have to go to their dads for the weekend or their moms for the weekend, and everybody was divorced, everybody was separating, and I took so much pride in the fact that my parents were still together. And mind you, I wasn't dumb, I was very observant, and I noticed that things were kind of off. But when I was younger, I didn't really think about that. I just was so excited that I had my mom and my dad, and they were together and happy. And obviously my parents weren't very expressive on the problems that were within the household. So all I knew was that they were together and that my siblings were having a good time and life was good. But it wasn't until probably 13 or 14 that I started to notice a change between my parents. It was more so in my mom because I rarely really saw my dad. He worked so much, and when he got home, he just went to bed, and I just didn't see him often, except for like in the summers. I feel like that's when I saw him the most. But the reason I noticed more so my mom was because I started to notice that she got to a point where she just didn't care. And I'm not saying care about like anything, but just, you can tell when someone's just not invested into the relationship. And for good reason. There's a lot of behind the scenes, a lot of backstory that happened that I'm not ready to share yet, but you could just tell, she would always try to keep herself distracted, and you could tell she just never wanted to be home, never wanted to be around the relationship, the situation. And even like I was talking to my sister the other day, and I never saw, my dad come home and be so excited to see my mom, or then be very affectionate towards each other. They never really hugged or cuddled or kissed in a way where you felt like, oh man, like my parents are in love. I never saw that. So I never really knew what being in love meant, because the only picture of it was my parents, which was far from what being in love should be like. And I just remember her just getting very distant, not necessarily with us, but just with the whole situation. And my parents separated when I was 15. And I say separated because I'm not exactly sure when their divorce was finalized, but they separated at age 15. And it honestly was the most traumatic thing that I've ever experienced, because my mom found out some things about my dad that instantly she was like, no, like I was trying to make it work and I wanted you guys to see him, but it's just not gonna work out. And it was like literally one shift from like one day to another. And at this point, they were already separated, but we were still kind of doing like, okay, go to your dad's for the week, go to your mom's for a week. And so my dad had the house that we basically grew up in, and my mom had her own apartment, which, mind you, this whole apartment situation, my mom was already mentally done with the relationship before she ended the relationship. So her being like, okay, you know what are my next steps? What am I going to do? She was trying to find a place and be comfortable and be set and be financially okay before she moved out, because she didn't want to leave and then, you know, have nothing. Because I don't know if you guys know, but it's very common for people, especially women, to stay in relationships because the man is the one that's bringing in that financial stability, that money that kind of like keeps you leveled, that a lot of people fear leaving because they don't think they're able to support themselves on their own. Which, total side note, but if you are in that situation, know that there's always a way to figure it out. But you're risking more staying in a relationship that's not healthy for you and risking more just being in that toxic environment than leaving and figuring it out. It might be hard for the first couple months, couple years, but at least you'll be able to say, you know, I did that. I provided for myself and I figured it out. And then it shows, you know, if you have kids, it shows your kids that you put yourself first, and you're showing them that despite the hardship and despite everything that could have gone wrong, you still made the decision of, I'm going to put me first and I'm going to take myself out of that relationship, even though I know that's your dad, or even though I thought being together would be better for my kids. I think that a lot of people that are in relationships and have a family, they think that being together is what's best for your kid. But if your kids see that you guys are not healthy together, if your kids see you guys arguing all the time, if they see you guys not even wanting to sleep in the same room, if they see you guys just, you know, hating each other instead of loving on each other, you're doing more for your kid by leaving, because then they won't have that picture of what love is, that is so toxic, because then they'll grow up and start to date and think that that's normal to be yelled at, or think that it's normal for you to be scared of your partner, or think that it's normal to live in a constant state of anxiety and anger. And I think that somewhere in the world it was taught to us that, you know, I mean, it has to do with so many things. For me personally, I think it comes from religion, because, you know, in the Bible it says, you know, like, once you marry your man, like your person, you are loyal to them and you stay with them, and through, like, till death do us part, right? And I think that a lot of people, especially older people that are not in my generation, they assume that if they divorce or if they separate from the father of their children, it says a lot about them and how they're not being a good mother, and how they can't stick it out and toughen it out through the rough days. But there's a difference between hard trials that you go with through your partner. Everybody goes through that. Everybody has arguments. Everybody has disagreements. But if at the end of communicating that with your person, you still bump heads, and there's always just, there's no common ground, and your children are literally watching you, either watching your partner belittle you or you belittle your partner. Like, no kid wants to grow up seeing their parents that way. No kid wants to watch their mom and their dad, or their mom and their mom, or their dad and their dad just continue to just tear each other apart. Because as much as people don't like to think it, kids are so smart. And they're so observant, and they absorb everything in the household. So if you're somebody who thinks that leaving would be selfish and unfair to your kid, really think about everything that they've seen in the household. And I know that was kind of like sidetracked, but I just think that it's so important to acknowledge that just because it's the father or the mother of your child does not mean that you have to stay together. Because you have to remember what you're teaching your kids. If you won't leave for yourself and your own well-being, think about how it's affecting your kid. Because let me tell you, it will take a toll. So much so that when they grow up, at least for me, I'm speaking for myself, you know, growing up and starting to date and getting in relationships, it's been a struggle. Like, it's been a struggle to find somebody that loves me like they should love me, because all I know is the way that my dad loved my mom, or the way that my mom loved my dad, and I don't know anything other than that. So I had to teach myself, you know, how someone's supposed to treat me. I had to teach myself that love is such a beautiful thing, And when you have somebody that treats you right, it makes you feel amazing and is able to communicate with you and able to work through certain situations without it getting into becoming like a toxic environment. Although it feels so good, it's so uncomfortable because I'm so used to things not working out. Or I'm so used to a conversation leading to an insane argument. Or I'm so used to nobody being able to talk in, just a regular tone of voice. It's always yelling and always escalates. So as an adult, it is difficult to find that love when you never saw it growing up. And I mention this because it's all things that I learned from the divorce of my parents, because I had to reteach myself what love is. I had to reteach myself that just because I grew up in a household where my parents weren't in love doesn't mean that I deserve to get into a relationship where I'm not in love with them and they're not in love with me. And now I'm barely starting to allow people in my life that will show me that love, because for a long time I was so scared to be vulnerable with people that I allowed negative love into my life, and I allowed people to treat me with the bare minimum and for me to idolize that because that's all I saw growing up. And I emphasize this because people don't realize how much growing up in a toxic relationship with your parents affects you as an adult. So if whoever's watching this that's currently in a situation when you're thinking like, oh, like I want to leave, but I can't because he's the father of my child or the mother of my child, and they're not going to be able to live in a perfect home, and everything's just going to be all screwed up. Really just take the second to just sit down and reflect and think, if you were the kid and you were watching your parents yell at each other all the time, and you were the kid, just scared in your room because you're like, oh my God, like, are they gonna get a divorce? Like, do they even love each other? Is this what love is all about? If that is what you want to teach your kid, or if it's not, make a decision. Because when they separated, yes, it was the most traumatizing experience, or one of the most traumatizing experiences. But I wouldn't change it for the world, because I learned so much and I unlearned so much as well. But back to the story, they divorced at 15, and up until I was 15 years old, I would say that we were pretty financially stable. We had this big, I think it had like 5 bedrooms. We had this big 5-bedroom house, this nice backyard. We were doing pretty good. And although we didn't receive everything that we wanted, because my dad was very stern on like, we don't want you guys to grow up spoiled, we still had that slight expectation of, if I need this, I'm gonna get it. And it's crazy because I never was hit with such a huge reality check until that moment, because when my parents divorced or separated, it was during like the end of the year, like December. So Christmas was coming around, and usually for Christmases with both my parents, and they lived together, we had a huge Christmas. Each kid was getting at least 10 Christmas presents, and it was, it was normal. It was just kind of how it was. But this is the holiday we would look forward to, because we'd get so many gifts and it'd be such a good time. And when they separated, it was our first Christmas in California with my mom's family, and I remember we were all sitting next to the tree, and we were watching my little cousin open all her gifts, and we didn't have any. I think actually we got maybe one. And for a second, I was like, man, like, how come like we don't have all the gifts that we used to have? But that thought just like slipped away so fast, because in that moment I was so grateful, because I realized just how blessed we were, just how much we had and how much we took it for granted. And so that Christmas, although it was so different than the most Christmases that we've had, I sat there and I thought, the fact that I'm even able to be there with my family and my mom and my siblings and just be able to enjoy the moment is a blessing within itself. Like, there's people that don't even get that for Christmas. They don't even get family time. They don't get to be surrounded by people that love them and truly care about them and can't wait to see them succeed. So that Christmas was such a humbling experience, because although we didn't receive all the gifts, I feel like we received the biggest gift, that was family and love and support. And I feel like that day it shifted my mentality, because I knew that the second that my parents separated and my mom cut communication, with my dad, that we were going to struggle. Because my dad was the main breadwinner. He brought in the money. He was the one that kept us financially stable. And so after that, it was kind of a complicated situation. Me and my older sister stayed with my aunt, and my mom and my younger two siblings stayed in Mexico. The reason we stayed with my aunt was because we were in high school and my mom wanted us to stay in the United States and just, finish out high school and just, continue to do good in school and get good grades so that eventually we could go to college. And that's all she wanted for us. And we lasted a year with my aunt, and I'm so grateful for her, because she housed us and she basically treated us like her kids. So I'm extremely grateful for her. But after that 1 year, my mom just couldn't do it. She just could not live in a way where she only had 2 of her kids full time and the other 2 only saw them, on the weekends, if that, if she had enough gas money to get to us. And I think that although it was it was a struggle going from not really stressing about money to stressing about it, it was a shift. But after the first year that we lived with my aunt, I was in my freshman year, my sister was in her sophomore year, or maybe she was in her junior year. I think she was in her junior year. That's besides the point. But my mom came and she was like, you know what, you guys are gonna move with me. Like, I can't not see you guys all the time. Like, I need you guys to live with me. And so then we all moved to Mexico with my grandma, which, bless her heart, for housing us for a year. And at that point, my sister was in her senior year and I was in my sophomore year. And we still didn't want to go to school in Mexico because we had done all of our schooling in the United States. And, these were like prime years to, start looking at colleges and start taking AP courses and start doing the things that would get you a better chance into a university. And so every single day we would cross the border and go to school. And my mom, it just blows my mind how much she hustled to keep us afloat. We crossed the border at probably 6 a.m. I don't even remember. The line took so long. None of us had our passports, so we used our birth certificate, so it took an even longer process because they had to scan the sheet and then decide if it was eligible enough to pass the border. And it was this whole process. And then sometimes there would be incidents where people would take forever crossing the border, and it was just this whole thing. And we did it every single day for a whole school year. And it was crazy because we would cross the border. My mom would drop my younger siblings off in middle school, and then she would drop us off, and then she would go to work, a 9-to-5 job. And then after work, she would come pick me up and my siblings up and take us to the mall. And we would do all of our homework there and just kind of try to get caught up in school. And then after a couple of hours of doing homework, she would take my sister to soccer practice that wouldn't end until 9:30 or 10. So we were literally just in our car from 3 to 9 because my mom wanted my sister to have the most amazing senior year experience. And I'm giving you guys this much detail because it's I feel like in the moment when we had nothing, or we thought we had nothing financially, we had so much because it bonded me and my family together in a way that I'm so grateful for, because now I'm so close with everybody and I have such a good connection with my siblings and my mom. But it was hard. There was days where we couldn't go to school because we didn't have gas money. There was days where I couldn't attend certain events in high school because we just couldn't afford to get there. Or there was days where I remember like we would literally eat food from the 7-Eleven gas station. Like that was our dinner almost every day. And there was times where like we could only afford like one box of pizza. And mind you, like my brother was a growing teenager, so he ate a lot. And then there was 2 of my sisters and me and my mom. And there was times where my mom would be like, oh no, I'm not hungry, like you guys eat it, when I knew she was. And if to any of you guys out there who has a single parent who is taking care of you guys, like be so grateful for them, because it is a hard job. And I feel like I didn't really like give her as much grace or give her as much gratitude, because I didn't know the struggle. Like I was just kind of trying to get through school and I was trying to focus on my life. But to be a single parent with 4 kids, not even a dime of child support from my dad, it's like insane. But I feel like I wouldn't change that experience for the world, because as I grew up, I started to learn how to save my money. I started to realize that not like life isn't just handed to you. You have to work your way through. You have to hustle. And my mom was the biggest hustler growing up. Like those prime ages from like 15 until I moved out, like she would find a job. She would find the money. She would somehow she would figure it out. And it was insane. It was like the most traumatizing experience of my life, but at the same time, I learned so much within those years. And I'm just so grateful for it, because I mean, it's kind of not off topic, but I always read or listen to motivational podcasts or motivating books, and they always say a lot of people want to be rich because they're looking for that satisfaction of, if I'm rich, I'll be happy. And almost every rich person that I read about always says, if your only intention of getting rich is because you want to be happy, you're gonna be surprised with failure, basically. Because although money provides you with a lot, and you're obviously able to do more things and take more vacations and experience life a little bit differently, true happiness comes within. And I think that within that time that my parents were divorced and we had no money, we were kind of forced to think about our mental health and think about our life and the grand aspect of everything. And it was just such a reality check, because I've never been so grateful for my family until that moment. And I appreciate my mom so much, and the bond that I have with my siblings is insane. Like right now, I would do absolutely anything for them. I love spending time with my siblings, and I love just the way that we are together, and it just proved that family is so strong. I feel like I'm kind of getting off topic because I go from like finances to divorce to relationship and all that, but when your parents get a divorce, it's insane. It's an overwhelming feeling, and especially, with things that aren't told to the public and stuff that happened behind the scenes and behind closed doors. There's a lot that went into it, and I hope that eventually I'll be able to speak on it. But I just want to say that anybody that's going through anything similar to what I've expressed today, I hope you know that as cheesy or as corny or as weird as it sounds, with time it does get better. Because with time, you allow yourself the opportunity to grow. With time, you experience new things and you're able to kind of sit back and reflect. With time, you meet new people. With time, you have new experiences. With time, you are able to have more gratitude for what you did have and for what you have now. And now I'm 21 years old, almost 22 in November, and I can't even imagine my life if my parents were still together. At all. It would have been so horrible, because one, they were not meant to be. And anyone could have seen that if you lived in our house. And I'm just so grateful that my mom decided to take that step and leave. which is such a hard thing to do. It's such a hard thing to do. And I give people so much praise for the people that do leave, because it's not an easy task. And I thank my mom for that, because when I left my first relationship, there was nothing wrong. It was not toxic. It wasn't bad. It was like, it was a pretty good, healthy, normal relationship. But when I knew it wasn't meant for me, it was very easy for me to make the decision to leave. And I genuinely think subconsciously it was easier for me because my mom decided to take that step with my dad, and she put herself first. And I think a lot of people have that misconception that the older they get, the harder it is to leave because it's all you've known. But let me tell you, I don't know what stage in life you're at right now. And I'm talking to whoever relates to this, because I know there's somebody out there. But it does not matter what stage in life you are at. If a little voice inside of you, a little part of you is telling you that you are not meant to be in the situation that you are in right now, you have to put yourself first and you have to leave. Whether you're thinking about yourself or the people around you that it's affecting, you have to understand that life is too short to just hold on to something that's not helping you, to hold on to something that's not growing you. And I feel like life just gets so much better after that. But that ends episode 17. I know it was kind of all over the place and I didn't get too in depth in certain details, but that was kind of the glimpse of what it felt like to have my parents get a divorce. To go from having everything to almost having nothing in the sense of the materialistic world. And it was so crazy because it got to the point where we couldn't even get my brother like basics, like socks and underwear, because he was growing so fast, but we didn't have the funds to provide that for him. And it was such a struggle because at that point I cared so much about what people thought. And so I would never tell people that we were, broke, that we were struggling, that we lived in Mexico, that I shared a room with my mom, my sister, and my other sister. Like, I didn't tell people anything because I was just so embarrassed. I was like, I don't want people to know that I don't have anything. We would go out with friends and they would all be eating and we'd be like, oh, like, we're not hungry. When in reality, we just didn't have money to pay for the food. But it was definitely a learning lesson. 100%. And at that point, I started to surround myself with people that loved me for me. And even now, it's still a challenge. Sometimes my money mindset is still something that I have to work on because I'm so used to that scarcity mindset of saving every single last penny and not spending it on a single thing because you don't know, when you'll need it or when there's an emergency, that I forget to kind of just live life and spend on experiences. Because money is so abundant. It flows. It's everywhere. Like, money is literally everywhere. But when you have that scarcity mindset, it's like you don't believe in yourself enough to believe that you could be rich. Or you could have just the right amount of money to keep you stable or comfortable. But that's kind of about me, my life, my parents' divorce. Maybe later on I'll go more in depth into it and actually speak on the little tiny pieces that are very important to the story and why my parents got a divorce and why we don't have the strongest relationship with my dad or why life is the way that it is. But I'm going to save that for another video. But I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video and you got something out of it. And just know that whoever is watching this, you are so loved, you're so cared for, and you deserve to be happy. You deserve to wake up in the morning and be refreshed and not dread your day, but rather just walk in your day with just so much joy and so much optimism and just so much love. But I will see you guys next week. Hopefully, fingers crossed, with me interviewing somebody very special to me and talking about life and just giving you guys advice on anything that I can, because you guys know I will never speak on something that I've never experienced, because then how am I supposed to give you advice if I haven't experienced it myself? But I will see you guys next video.